Hey everyone, welcome back to another week of the Triple Play. This is Danielle. We have a lot to talk about today. I'm joined with Nathan and Andrew, who have been on the show before. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. The Vols suffered another heartbreaker. I guess you could call it a heartbreaker, even though it was kind of a blowout. To Ole Miss, 34-33. I think most of us were expecting it to be a little worse than this. I'm just glad we put numbers on the board, to be quite honest, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, heartbreaker is a good way to describe it because our defense played so well early on. And, it was 0-0 for a long time, and then we were leading, and then midway through, about end of the second quarter, Ole Miss just turned it on, and it was all downhill from there.
Definitely.
Yeah, there was a point in the game where it was 3-17, and you had the ball, and you thought if you get a touchdown here, it was in the third quarter at that point. You get a touchdown, you might be able to score, and they threw another interception off what Worley had. I think it was his second one. It was just, in my opinion, his worst one where he was rolling right and threw it right into the defender's hands. But, yeah, a backbreaker, heartbreaker, whatever you want to call it. Another tough loss. 0-3 in the conference now. Yeah.
Yeah, looking at the numbers, like you talked about, the first half, it looked pretty solid going into halftime. We were down 10-3. Not too bad of a deficit there. I thought maybe it could be a little bit closer with how our defense was playing. I was expecting some interceptions. But other than that, defense is still looking fairly good. I think they're up to the height that we'd expect them to be at. Offense, still so many struggles. Looking at the rushing yards, 0 yards for rushing for UT. Some notable numbers in that. Jalen Hurd had 40 yards. Justin Worley, -41. -41. I want to say there were 3 players for the Vols that were in negative yardages. I can't remember off the top of my head who it was, but I know Worley was the one that was really far into those numbers. Pretty sad to see. But looking at Worley's passing numbers, he was 19 for 34 for 191 yards. I think that was on the game. Or maybe that might have been for the whole... No, that was on the game. Yeah, that was definitely the game. I was hoping that the...
You're hoping for better numbers.
Yeah, I was hoping for the 7 sacks to not be true.
Yeah,
that's where I hesitated. I was like, 7 sacks in one game? Is this real life? But it sadly is. But yeah, 3 interceptions thrown by Worley. That, I feel like that's low. That's a starting point, I could say. But his numbers just not what we were expecting.
Yeah, 2 of those interceptions were 100% just either bad decisions or bad throws. The third one was kind of iffy because Josh Malone looked like he might have slowed up a little bit on that route. But like the second one, or I don't remember if that was the first one or the second one, the one that he just kind of threw up, and it was behind Josh Malone where he was going, and it was just an easy pick. It was like a sit duck, and it was like I was watching, and Worley has been the guy for our offense, and our offensive line has struggled, and he's had to play really well for our offense to do anything, and then Saturday it just kind of did not go well for him.
No, and with the rushing attack only having 0 yards, Hurd having 40, when you limit a guy like that, you can drop back in coverage, and that's exactly what they did. And they forced Worley to beat him. And Tennessee's offensive line can't. Now granted, Ole Miss's defensive line might be the best defensive line you're going to play all year. However, couldn't give him any time. It was another bruiser for Worley, just getting hit after hit after hit. 7 sacks. Is that what you said? Is that what the total was? 7 sacks. But on the road, they only had 3 penalties, which is a good stat for us on the road in a hostile environment like Ole Miss. The problem is you have 4 turnovers. Ole Miss has 0, and you're not going to win on the road when it's like that. Even keep it close. They only had 10 first downs the entire game. That's a rough stat right there. 10 first downs, a field goal. So. Just another rough week at the helm for the offense. The defense played phenomenal. You keep your team in the game, and then after a certain point, it doesn't even matter. So.
I mean, when you're on the road against the number 3 team, they've got talent and depth all over the field. Something's got to give eventually if your offense is struggling. And Ole Miss's defense was playing great, and at one of the best teams in the country, definitely the best team in my opinion, that we've played yet. Something's got to give, and it did about into the second quarter, and then a lot in the second half.
Gave the wrong way, I guess you could say. But talking about defense, looking at the third down conversions, 3 for Tennessee, 7 for Ole Miss. That's a really high number for Ole Miss. I feel like our defense, with the way they played, granted they played great, but the number could have been much lower for stopping them. Fourth down conversions as well. Ole Miss was able to get one of those. We tried for one and did not go well. But also looking at Ole Miss, Bo Wallace, I feel like his numbers could have been a little higher. He was 13 for 28 for 199 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Really solid numbers for him, but I think they could have been higher, but we're lucky they weren't.
That's a testament to how well the defense played, especially early on. The defense gave him some great looks, and they were playing hard, and A.J. Johnson, the heart of that defense, was playing with a great level of energy, and just the defense just all together almost the entire game just played as well as they could have. Cam Sutton on the con Treadwell, he shut him down. He had like 4 catches, I think, and that's one of the best receivers in the country. They just played great.
Our defense, Jancic's got something going right. They're putting something in the juice over there because the defense has played great all year, and it's going to get better with the players coming in.
Yeah.
We talked about it really the last time we did the show.
Oh, we did,
Tuttle and McKenzie.
Shalil McTuttle is what we're going to be looking
coming
for.
In the backfield. So this defense is going to continue to get better, and that is the starting block in the SEC. You got to have a great defense, so that's exciting. But gosh, you can't win when you don't score. And
No.
8 consecutive quarters in the SEC without a touchdown. So stat to keep in mind.
That's a heartbreaking stat, and especially going into our team next week that we'll be playing is Alabama. It's not going to be easy against them at all. Alabama just completely dominated, annihilated, any word you can think of in that term, just pounded Texas A&M 59-0. I was shocked, I was extremely shocked. We all know that Alabama was coming off of an upset at the hands of Ole Miss the week before, so we knew they would have some motivation into this game, but to shut out Kenny Hill and Texas A&M, that was just incredible. Looking at Kenny Hill's numbers for Texas A&M, he was 17 for 26, 138 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. And then if you look over at Blake Sims, he was 16 for 27, 268 yards with 3 touchdowns. And notable point, one of his touchdowns, he ran in for a touchdown. 43 yards, I believe it was. Yes, 43-yard touchdown in the second quarter when Alabama scored 35 points. 35 points in one quarter. That's scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the scary thing is that team's coming into Knoxville Saturday with us struggling on offense, and it's not good when you see a top team like that return into form against a pretty decent team in Texas A&M. At the beginning of the year, when Texas A&M went into South Carolina and beat the crud out of South Carolina, and since then the SEC has been way up and down, and it seems like Alabama's coming back up after that close loss at Ole Miss, and now Tennessee's got to play Bama after Ole Miss. It's just a lot of tough teams out west.
Yeah, that western side is unbelievable. Before the show, we were talking about Arkansas. They've lost 16 consecutive conference games. Fact of the matter is they're playing 16 unbelievable teams. They drew Georgia from the East, which is the most unfortunate draw you can have. I don't know who their other Eastern opponent will be, but for Alabama this week against Tennessee, if you're a Tennessee fan, the one thing you'll be looking forward to, one, it's a night game in Neyland. So no matter what, it's going to be fun. You're going to have your tailgaters out about noon. Everybody will be feeling great for the game. But another thing is this could be a trap game for Alabama. The rest of the way, they have at LSU, Mississippi State, Auburn, and then they get Western Carolina in there. But that's number 24, number 1, and number 5 through your last 5 games. They do have a bye week after Tennessee, which does help. But if you're Tennessee, you got to come out. You got to continue to play the best defense you can, and just hope that something goes right. Somebody slips on a deep ball or something, and you get a wide open guy that can catch it and score. But no, this Alabama team's really good, and they're third in the nation, only allowing an average of 13 points to their opponents, and that's a scary stat considering we don't score points to begin with. So let's just hope we're not Texas A&M. 59-7 is better than 59-0. So
before Saturday, before we played Ole Miss and Alabama played A&M, I would have given us a decent chance to knock off Alabama, and that's gone a lot farther down. After seeing Alabama play A&M and watching us struggle against Ole Miss, it's going to be a dogfight Saturday.
Definitely. And looking around at other games in the SEC this weekend, South Carolina dominated Furman as expected, 41-10. I was a little impartial to Furman. I know a guy that plays on the football team, so I was hoping maybe there'd be an upset, but not likely. South Carolina is now 3-2. in the conference, 4-3 overall. Like we said, Texas A&M could not stand up at all against Alabama, 59-0 there. Only one close game in the SEC this week, which is really shocking to me. Georgia against Arkansas. Georgia won 45-32. Really close game. I was expecting a little bit more of a deficit. I didn't expect Arkansas to really come out like they did. I mean, granted, now they're 0-4 in the SEC. But looking at the rushing, Nick Chubb, he had 30 carries for 202 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not too bad, considering he's, a freshman?
Yeah.
Yes.
It makes you wonder about how their offense was set up when Gurley was there.
Yeah.
Because Hudson Mason and the offense have been really good since Chubb has come in. And Chubb's been fantastic, too, taking over. And they've both played really well, and their offense has looked nice in 2 weeks against Missouri and now Arkansas.
I think they woke up against Tennessee. They realized, we're better than what we played against the Volunteers, and they showed it these past couple of weeks. That number 10 ranking to a lot of people, well, they're getting kind of lucky, they're squeaking by. No, that's a good Georgia football team. And even though the SEC West is dominant, Georgia could potentially pose a threat in that SEC championship game for whoever comes out from the West. So I'm very impressed with Georgia. Another good win, going down to Fayetteville and getting that win. That's a good one. That's a good one for Georgia.
And that 45-32 score was actually a little bit closer than what it was through about 3.5 quarters because Arkansas made a little bit of a comeback there in the end. Georgia was handing it to them most of that game, and it was all Georgia's way until maybe a little bit left in the fourth quarter when it was somewhat out of reach. But Arkansas was trying to make maybe a little bit of magic happen, but it didn't work out in their favor.
It was 45-19 at one point, and then Arkansas just suddenly hit the throttle and started scoring. You got a little nervous there for a second, but Georgia able to hold on.
Yeah, and talking about the surge in the fourth quarter, Arkansas scored 13 points in the fourth quarter. They did that as well in the third quarter, but to really come out and to only hold Georgia's 7 points in the fourth, I think that's impressive in and of itself. Looking at other games in the SEC, Kentucky and LSU dominated there 41-3. I was expecting Kentucky to come out a little stronger. They're contenders now, and I've never thought I would use that word with Kentucky in a sport that's not basketball. But contenders for the SEC, that's impressive. But LSU just took over in that game. Looking at the stats for that one, like I said, Kentucky didn't come out and play as hard as I was expecting them to, especially whenever it comes to rushing. Their rushing yard totals were 71 yards in comparison to LSU's 303. I mean, Kentucky this season is known for carrying the ball. They've put out speed that I was not expecting to see this season, but their numbers were just really low against LSU.
They've recruited well, and their talent has played well so far, but they just hit a brick wall at LSU. They turned the ball over a couple times, and LSU had, I think, a punt return for a touchdown. They kind of killed some momentum that Kentucky had, and just kind of like the Tennessee game is once LSU got rolling against Kentucky, they just rolled.
Yeah, Kentucky with Stoops at the helm, you have to wonder how long he'll be there because you really can't win a championship at Kentucky. So we'll see. Maybe a James Franklin type situation there. But this is going to sound crazy. You look at Kentucky's schedule. They play Mississippi State next week at home, but Mississippi State's number one team in the country. I don't see them losing to Kentucky. No. They play at Missouri. They play Georgia. They play at Tennessee, and they play at Louisville. This team is 5-2. They might miss a bowl game. They could potentially miss a bowl game with the remainder of this schedule. That's one of the tougher outs, considering that 3 of their last 5 are on the road, and the 2 home games are against number 1 and number 9. So, this Kentucky team better be careful. After a 5-1 start, you can't lose it all after a bad week at LSU. And even if you get throttled this week, which I think they will by Mississippi State, you cannot lose hope. You need to go up to Missouri and win and secure a bowl bid, because I would not want to be sitting at 5-6 or even 5-5 having to go to Knoxville and to Louisville, which is a rival school. So very interesting situation up there in Lexington. But, man, they got beat bad this week by LSU, and kind of was good to see, in my opinion. I'm just a fan of Kentucky.
It sounds strange to say that a 5-1 team is gonna have to steal one to make a bowl game, but that's it. That's the way it is with their schedule. Is they're gonna have to steal one in Missouri or in Knoxville or at Louisville, because at home against Georgia and Mississippi State, those are 2 teams that are playing really, really well. And so, like Andrew was saying, really interesting to see how Kentucky could start like that, and then it's very possible they could not make a bowl game, especially if they play even half as bad as they did against LSU.
Yeah, that is true. And we were talking about Missouri. We'll move on to their game real quick. They embarrassed Florida, to be quite honest. It's not easy to play in the swamp. They made it look like it was a cakewalk. 42-13 for Missouri going into Gainesville. Very impressive. Looking at Matty Mock's numbers, he's struggled the past couple of weeks, but he was 6 for 18 for 20 yards passing with 1 interception. Still struggling there. But whenever it came to rushing, he had 7 carries for 38 yards. Not too bad for a quarterback, I would say.
No.
Yeah, you couldn't tell he's struggling by looking at the score of that game.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally, I'm a fan of Matty Mock. I think that he's a very underrated quarterback that's in a system that doesn't fit him, in particular at Missouri. But Gary Pinkel, he's got his system. He sticks with it every year, and he's a every year 8 or 9 win coach, and regardless of who's his quarterback. And I think Matty Mock very underrated, but man, they did. Embarrass is the right word. They took Florida to the doghouse and just showed them exactly what it's like. It looks like they were showing Florida what it's like to play in the SEC instead of Florida welcoming still a newcomer to the conference. Missouri's made its footprint, that's for sure.
I think I don't remember the exact number, but I think Missouri, when they hit 42-0, they had like 42 points on like 199 offensive yards.
Yeah.
They had like a fumble return for a touchdown, an interception return for a touchdown. I think they had a punt. I don't remember. It was like they scored every other way except for offensive touchdowns. And Florida just looked awful. And they had Fire Muschamp chants going on in the stadium, and they tried to play a 2 QB system with Driscoll and Traylon Harris both out there, and it just looked like a disaster all around Saturday for Florida.
And talking about Harris and Driscoll, their numbers too, there were 3 interceptions between them. Harris went 8 for 12 for 98 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, but Driscoll 7 for 19 for 50 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I don't see what's happening with this Florida team. They're deteriorating at the seams. It's going to be interesting for them for the rest of the season, but the SEC in general, everything's still just up in the air. But that's how it is every year with the SEC. That's the beauty of the Southeastern Conference. But we're going to go ahead and move to the rest of college football with the game of the century that was happening this weekend that ended up just being miraculous in some ways if you're a Florida State fan. But it was a very close game, very interesting between Florida State and Notre Dame. Florida State came out on top 31-27. So close, especially right down to the wire.
Yeah, I thought Jameis Winston should not play in that game. I think it speaks a lot to Florida State's, what's the right word for it? Their conscience, maybe. Their team morale to let Jameis Winston go ahead and play. But that's just Jimbo Fisher trying to win a game. So I'll go ahead and give him the leniency on that. I thought the offensive pass interference call to end the game it looked like the right call, but it's a call you just don't make in that type of situation. And, it's just Florida State getting lucky. And I never thought I'd cheer for Notre Dame until this Saturday. And I found myself rooting for the Irish. Unfortunately, they didn't come out with the win. But, man, what a game that was to the very last snap, like you said. It was fun to watch.
And looking at Winston's numbers, he was 23 for 31, 273 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. But what really shines in the passing numbers is Everett Golson for Notre Dame. 313 yards, 31 for 52, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Those 2 interceptions really do hurt, but, he really came out and just showed his stuff. I was really impressed with him. Looking around at other games, well, actually, before we move on to that, there's been talk that Jameis Winston is expected to declare in the 2015 draft. Came out yesterday from Jason LaCanfora. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but from CBS Sports. In some ways, I'm not surprised that this is happening, but for it to come out in the way that it's coming out with everything that's happening, a little suspicious, maybe. I don't know.
I feel like it's one of those things that's like it was going to happen anyway. With all the stuff that's going on, there's no way that either Florida State would allow in quotes him to stay or him to stay just because with all the talent and, he's still undefeated as quarterback at Florida State. And I can't say that he would lose draft stock if he stayed, but there's just nothing really anymore for him to gain if he stayed with all the stuff swirling around him. But yeah, with I mean, I guess anybody could report all season long and say, well, yeah, he's going to go to the draft. But for it to come out right after the game, maybe somebody let something slip. Who knows?
Right.
It'd be speculation.
I just, he's one of those situations where he needs to get out of college football or he needs to stay in college football. And I would say he needs to get out because of all the things that are swirling around him. I don't think he's the pro type yet. He reminds me so much of Robert Griffin, the way he plays, and we all know how he's doing. He could be, exactly. He
Very true.
He could be completely opposite. I don't know in the NFL, but I know that he needs to get out. If he leaves, don't expect him to be number 1, number 2. He might be the third quarterback taken, and not an overwhelmingly good quarterback class, just because there's so many questions surrounding. Gosh, is this guy going to get put in jail? Are we going to have what's going on with this guy? So very interesting situation there, but he continues to win, so got to give it to him.
Yeah, and looking around at other games, like we were getting ready to talk about, Utah edged Oregon State on Thursday night, 29-23. I was expecting a little bit, not to be this close, but I mean, Oregon State, they're always a good team to watch. Baylor was upset by West Virginia. I think that was a big surprise, but West Virginia is 5-2 now in the season, so they've really been playing hard. But for Baylor to just lose by that much to them, that was really shocking.
That comes a week after their big comeback win against TCU.
Yeah.
TCU is a really good team. I was expecting Baylor to maybe make a push, for that playoff. But you never know now after that loss, and they just did not play well at all. They were still in that game, but
And speaking of TCU, they dominated Oklahoma State 42-9. Not much of a surprise there. TCU is always really strong, but Oklahoma State, I'm happy they put up 9 points. I was kind of expecting less than that, to be quite honest, but a really good game there. Speaking of running up scores, Ohio State beat Rutgers 56-17. I think that score could have been lower, but Urban Meyer loves to run up points. We've seen it before, so that's there. Nebraska beat Northwestern 38-17. Arizona State beat Stanford 26-10. Oklahoma got upset by Kansas State. I personally loved seeing that. 31-30. That was a really interesting game overall. I thought Oklahoma would have it, but came down to the end. Missed field goal. Was really, really interesting.
it's a rough way to lose, missing a field goal. Oklahoma played decently, but when you're playing a ranked team in a good conference, you've got to play well.
Yeah.
And there were a couple things. I don't know. Did they miss multiple field goals in that game?
I think they missed one in the second quarter.
Yeah.
I think they missed two and an extra point.
Yeah, there was some very big.
There's like some things, kind of like turnovers in the SEC, some things that you just can't do and expect to win against a good team, and those things happened, and they didn't win against a good team in Kansas State.
What's funny is with how good the SEC, especially the SEC West, is. The Big 12 is kind of being swept under the rug. There's some really good teams in that league, and it's going to be very fun to the end, considering they don't even have a conference championship game. That the conference champion is just going to be declared, and there's going to be a couple one-loss teams. Well, they're all now one-loss teams, and very interesting scenario out there in the Big 12. But Oklahoma losing really kind of took me off guard this week. I thought they would get by Kansas State, but when you miss extra points and field goals against a ranked opponent, a top 15 opponent, you're not going to win. So kind of had it coming to them. And
looking at the rankings for college football right now, there are only 4 teams that are undefeated. Marshall at number 23, who is 7-0, and then you have Mississippi, Florida State, and Mississippi State all at the top 3. But a little thing that's really standing out to most people is whenever you look in the top 5 right now for the AP poll, 4 of the top 5 are from the SEC, and what's more, they're from the SEC West, like you were talking about. That's the first time in history, I believe, that a conference has been able to say that they have 4 of the top 5, and they're all in one division. So that's really interesting. But I mean, things are still just really up in the air. Things keep moving around in the standings. The top 3 is still the same as last week, which I think been a while since that happened in the AP polls, but college football is just really, really exciting right now. But we're going to go ahead and move to the NFL. We'll save the best for last whenever it comes to the NFL. Big night for Peyton. But we'll go ahead and talk about the Titans.
Can we not?
That's the reaction most Titans fans are having this season. So they lost a close one to Washington. Colt McCoy really came out. I loved Colt McCoy whenever he played at Texas. I'm not afraid to admit that. Loved him back then. But it's been 2 years since he played a snap. So to have him come out, he was really emotional after the game, which was expected. But, I mean, he just shut it down.
He did, and I think he secured his spot starting next week for the Redskins, who are the 1-5 Redskins. And the Titans. I don't know what it's not. It's not your defense is overwhelmingly bad, and here's what it is: you don't have a quarterback that is healthy, and you don't have a quarterback that can play. Jake Locker, even when he's healthy, isn't the best. He's not going to win you a football game. He might keep you in one. And then no running back. Bishop Sankey took most of the load for the Titans last week.
He's got potential, but he's not there yet.
Right, and and the Titans continue to draft offensive linemen and defensive linemen. You got to start drafting some skill players. You got good receivers and a great tight end in Delaney Walker. Yeah. No one can get it to him. Charlie Whitehurst might be the worst quarterback in the NFL right now. He got beat by Colt McCoy. So
you were talking about drafting skill players. They drafted Kendall Wright a couple years ago, and Kendall Wright's been fantastic. Yeah. He scored one of the only touchdowns in that game, and juked, I think, 3 defenders out in that one move. And he's been great. That's the only draft pick in the past 5-6 years that has made an impact on the offense. And that's been the problem is, 17 points is nice, but when the Redskins score 19, you got to outscore somebody to win. And 2 touchdowns, a struggling quarterback, struggling rushing core, everything's struggling with the Titans pretty much.
It's a franchise on the downslope, if there is ever a downslope. The Raiders are at rock bottom, so they can only get better from here. And I think they've got the right guy, McKenzie, as their GM. You get to the Titans, and they just continue to lose, and it's like they're getting worse every week. They made the biggest lateral coaching move in history by going from Mike Munchak to Ken Wisenhunt. Very tough situation for Tennessee right now. And Titans fans are close to giving up on this team.
Yeah.
Don't expect many people next week.
I can agree.
In LP Field.
As a Titans fan.
As a Titans fan, I can tell you I'm almost ready to give up on it.
Right. Moving on to another game. We're going to talk about the Indianapolis-Cincinnati game. It was the first time since 2009, I believe, that the Colts were able to force a shutout, which was really impressive. But if you look at Andrew Luck's numbers, it's just another week of Andrew Luck being Andrew Luck. 27 for 42, 344 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 sacks as well. That kind of surprised me. But if you look at Cincinnati, they had 4 sacks between Dalton and Sanu. But pretty impressive game there for Indianapolis. They are still remaining consistent. They're 5-2 right now. But the Bengals, I thought they might be going on to an upslope a little bit, but now it's just they're kind of stuck.
Bengals are so inconsistent. And they're playing without A.J. Green right now, which is a tough guy to lose, one of the best NFL receivers. But on the flip side of that, the Colts are a good team. They're one of those good NFL teams that nobody talks about. But at the same time, they haven't shown that in the postseason, going far to say, hey, we're ready for that Super Bowl run. And part of that is, you got Peyton over there that you got to deal with. But they're still a good team, top in the AFC South. So look for them towards the end of the year to maybe surprise some teams in the playoffs.
Definitely. Looking at a really surprising statistic right now in the NFL, the Cowboys are 6-1. Yes, 6-1. Who would have thought this would be happening for the Dallas Cowboys? Well, Nathan apparently said that he might, but if that's the case, you're psychic, and that's incredible.
I need to go to Vegas.
Yeah, you do. Cowboys beat the Giants 31-21. I don't see where all this is coming from for Dallas. Romo himself was 17 for 23, 279 yards. 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. A good note for the Giants, Eli Manning did not throw an interception in this game. So that's always a nice little positive point for the Giants. But I don't think many people really saw the Cowboys coming out and being this strong or strong in general.
Somebody in Dallas clicked on the DeMarco Murray light bulb because their offense runs through DeMarco Murray. And he has been more than happy to say, let's do it that way. And he's been great, and their offense has worked great through him. And 6-1, you couldn't ask for more than that.
He's the first rusher in NFL history to have his first 7 games of the season all be over 100 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an impressive stat within itself. And when the running game gets good like that, Tony Romo is not a horrendous quarterback. He's just not a clutch quarterback.
Right.
And those get confused all the time. So when Tony Romo is able to sit back in the pocket and find, in my opinion, the best receiver in football in Des Bryant, I have him edged over Calvin Johnson. When you give him time to sit back there and throw it to him, he's going to make completions. And he's got Jason Witten, one of the best pass blocking tight ends and a great tight end catching the football. So watch out for the Cowboys. That'll beat the Giants twice, probably the Redskins twice. Can't wait till they play Philadelphia. That'll be fun.
And like you said, Romo's not a bad QB.
Right,
Like in the past, they've had to rely on him so much. It's just kind of like what happened with Tennessee and Ole Miss this weekend.
Yeah.
It's like when you're not running and you're having to throw the ball, and you're knowing that Tony Romo's going to throw the ball, it can change your defensive game plan a little bit. And now they're going through DeMarco Murray more, and even though you're having to honor DeMarco Murray, you may have to do a little more than that because Murray he's a beast in the backfield. And Dallas is a good-looking team right now. They've got a great offensive line. It's all been clicking, and it may all stay clicking for a long time. So it'll be interesting to see.
Definitely. But moving on to the game that really, well, it was one for the record books, I guess you could say, to use the horrible cliche. Broncos beat the 49ers 42-17, but Peyton Manning, being Peyton Manning, broke a record, and this time it was the biggest one you could get. 510 touchdown passes in a career. He was just phenomenal last night. There's no way of going past it. His numbers were great. 22 for 26, 318 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, only sacked twice. Great night for Peyton.
Cut and paste. Every game. Great
Every
night.
game.
Great
night for Peyton. But little fun fact I was doing some research last night about his first touchdown in the NFL. But before we get into that, I'm going to list off some stats from this picture that I saw on numerous different websites last night talking about like all of the players who received touchdowns from Peyton Manning. There were 45 players overall, 11 from the Broncos, 34 from the Colts. But just looking at the top 5 in general, you had, at number 5, Demaryius Thomas, who at the time, whenever it was just the 509 touchdowns, had 29 touchdown passes from him. He caught the big one, but by the end of the game, he was up to 30 touchdowns. So Peyton right now is at 510, like everybody's heard. But going to number 4, you have Marcus Pollard at 34 touchdowns from Peyton. Third place is Dallas Clark for 44 touchdowns. Reggie Wayne's at second place with 67 touchdowns. And Mr. Marvin Harrison is at first place with 112 touchdowns from Peyton. But if you go back to September 6th, 1998, when Dan Marino was still in the league and everything was beautiful in the NFL, Peyton got his first touchdown against the Miami Dolphins. It was at home. Miami ended up winning 24-15. But Peyton's numbers that night, he threw for 302 yards, 21 for 37, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions. That 1 touchdown came with 4 seconds left in the game to Marvin Harrison. So if you just look at the distinct differences between the first and the most recent, I mean, like I said, 318 yards last night in comparison to 302 in his first touchdown game. So, I mean, Peyton's just fairly consistent. I mean, the 3 interceptions, fairly might be putting it, yeah. But the 3 interceptions for his first game where he threw a touchdown, it's kind of funny to see that because you're not used to those that high of a number. I mean, 3, not really all that high, but for Peyton, that's pretty high. Yeah. But, I mean, it's just Peyton being Peyton, kind of like Andrew Luck being Andrew Luck. There's something with the Colts bringing up quarterbacks, I guess you could say.
That's just another record to put under Peyton Manning's legacy as a QB, and he's got a bunch of them, and that's some would argue his biggest record thus far. Most touchdowns ever by a quarterback. That's that's above every quarterback. Which there are some big names under Peyton Manning, and you could argue now. Just something else to argue that Peyton is the best quarterback of all time. I would argue definitely that he's the best regular season QB of all time. We'll see maybe this year if the Broncos have more of a solid team if they can make a Super Bowl run that ends better than it did last year in February.
Definitely.
The cool thing about Peyton Manning is if you do some of the numbers, if he throws 3 touchdown passes every game the rest of this season, just this season, that'll put him at 50 for the year. He'll run that total up to about 550 touchdowns. Who's not to say he can play another year or 2 in the NFL? with a good offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he is getting old, but Peyton's never been a guy to sling the ball. You know,
Right.
he beats you with his mind. He puts the ball where only his guy can put it. He's not a Tom Brady or a Colin Kaepernick that just zing the ball at their receivers. So the way he plays might give him another year or two. Stretching it. I think he'll definitely play next year. It's definitely going to be exciting. He's just the best.
Have you seen Mike?
And super, super fun to watch every game he goes out there and plays. But just another, like I said, cut and paste. Another great week for Peyton, another record, and hopefully we can get this thing going, keep it going.
Definitely. And looking around the league real quick, the Patriots had a close one against the Jets, 27-25. The Jets are 1-6 on the season. I don't know what's up with the Patriots right now. They are just not the Patriots team we're used to. They're just 5-2 on the season. It's still pretty high for them, but they just aren't putting it out as much as they should this year. Ravens beat the Falcons 29-7. The Browns lost to the Jaguars, giving the Jaguars their first win on the season after weeks of talking about, wow, it's the Browns. They're doing so well, but 24-6 loss. Mm-hmm.
We talked about that, how well the Browns could be playing. And
Right.
Be something.
Mm-hmm. The Rams beat the Seahawks 28-26. Vikings lost to the Bills by 1 point, 17-16. Really close game there. Just an overall fairly decent weekend in the NFL. Tonight you have the Texans going against the Steelers. Should be an interesting matchup. Steelers have been struggling a lot this season, which hurts my heart, but it'll hurt my fantasy team even more since I have the Steelers and the Texans defense and special teams. Game time decision on that one. But yeah, NFL, I mean, Peyton, it's Peyton's house, let's be honest. The NFL right now, all about Peyton.
It is. Then it will probably be that way until somebody does something spectacular. If the Jaguars got their first win, and no one's saying a word about it.
Exactly.
The Bears are 0-3 at home.
Mm-hmm.
The Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. The Saints are probably not going to make the playoffs.
Which is shocking.
Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
It's Peyton's house. It's Peyton's time.
Yeah.
And as a Peyton fan, you got to love it. It's the best.
Absolutely.
EFL.
Yeah, VFL. I mean, he has risen to the top in all the ways, including the record books. So this is a fantastic time for Vol fans, Broncos fans, and just football fans in general. But before we finish off the show, tomorrow night is the first game of the World Series. Royals and Giants. I was not expecting this.
No.
The Royals, are they ever going to lose? When are they going to lose is the question.
I hope not. That would be the best story in a long time. The Royals haven't lost a playoff game since 1985. I just love that stat because every time they don't lose, I can just pull it back out. It's a wonderful thing to say. There's no, kind of like Moneyball in 02, it's like there's no rhyme or reason. And whatever they're doing over there in KC, whatever they're putting in the water, putting in the soup, it's working. And I hope they get a win. Not that I'm that against the Giants, but I would just love to see a KC win.
Yeah, and the fact that it's two wild card teams that are in the World Series. Great. I mean, it hurts me because it's the Giants who demolished the Pirates. I mean, 11 hits to 3 hits. That stat is not going to leave my mind. 3 hits for the Pirates that night was just horrible. But Giants have really come out strong. But KC, just, I don't know, something about KC. It's interesting.
What's tough for Kansas City, in my opinion, is the Giants have been here and they know how to handle it and they know exactly how to go about everything about the World Series, the pregame preparation, the night before, the meal, the traveling, how you handle getting off the bus. I mean, just every little step the Giants know. Yeah, the Giants have been here. They know exactly how to do it. But I don't know who to take in any game. No. Who's pitching for either team. It doesn't matter. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. It's two franchises that really care about their baseball.
Oh, yeah.
And especially in Kansas City this year. But don't forget about those Giants fans. Every single game, it's like it could be the middle of August, or middle of August, June, it could be the middle of October. It doesn't matter. Those Giants fans are out. It's going to be really fun, really exciting, and I personally can't wait. Go Royals.
Definitely. We'll be seeing Bumgarner going against Shields that night. That's what's projected right now. Things could change between now and tomorrow, but that's pretty much it for this week. Really loaded show, but yeah, hopefully things will stay as exciting in sports as they have been this week, so we will see you next week.